I got this video that just crossed the timeline from Kenzo Fukuda, who's a clutch points. Looks like he's a Golden State Valkyries and Warriors beat writer. He's in New York and talking to New York Liberty player Natasha Cloud. And I thought what Natasha had to say here was very cool to see from our professional athletes.
Ask also about Zohran Mamdani.
Mamdani, my boy.
Big win, right?
It's a big win for the people. It's a huge win for the city of New York. And for me as an athlete, no matter what market that I go into or what organization I play for, it's really important to care about the community that I play for as well. And so understanding what a pivotal moment this was for the city, what a pivotal moment it is for the working class people, and just overall, I think a lot of things can be said about Mamdani. He gets the worst PR because he's a Muslim, he's a socialist, and he's a Democrat. But he believes that it is the government's right to take care and make sure that all of its constituents live a dignified life, regardless of who you are, what your religious affiliation or background is. And I think that's beautiful. The ability to freeze 2 million tenants' rent in a time that we're headed for a recession within the next quarter. I think it's really important for the people of New York with a tax that was raised for rent by Cuomo a few years ago. It's just all around. He wants better buses so you can get to and from work quicker. He wants to fund more into our public schooling, making sure kids eat lunch for free as they should. That's a necessity of families that I think it is a government's responsibility to carry, while also allowing police to do their jobs, which is focus on actual crimes and homicides and things that are happening in the city, but also delegating and opening jobs to mental health professionals and social workers to handle anything that isn't deemed within a homicide or a violent act. And I think that just creates peace, that creates love, it creates understanding. It separates that friction between community and police too by allowing them to just do their normal jobs. So I think overall it's just like it's the right choice. But why it's so powering for me is it restored my hope in humanity a little bit. That even with the confines of what's happening right now in our government and in our country, that the people will speak, the people will show up, and there's a lot of humanity left in this world for us to care about one another.
Definitely. I was going to ask a follow-up about hope, but I think you...
We don't get the answer there, but yeah, amazing. And she is a 2019 WNBA champion, WNBA peak performer in assists in 2022, and 3-time all-defensive selection.
Yeah, it's great to hear that from a professional athlete, and I'm sure she'll get a lot of shit for it. I'm sure she'll get shit that has absolutely nothing to do with her support for Mamdani, just right-wingers attacking her for all the usual things they attack, accomplished women, especially women of color for. So kudos to her for speaking out on it, period, because she's going to get a lot of crap, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but, she's not as articulate on the issue of politics as some of the right wing celebrities you hear, like Bryce I Love Hitler Mitchell from the UFC, or, Eric Adams' best friend and streaming partner, like Sneeko. Right. So what can you expect?
Well, she needs to be more educated on the issues like they are. Right.
Yeah. She's not sophisticated in her analysis.
Didn't she listen to Riley Gaines about how much the right wing cares about women's sports? Like, how come that isn't making any kind of impression on her, I wonder?
Right. Yeah. I'm sure those same Riley Gaines fans are going to come at her and do some sort of transvestigation or something. I'm sure that's all they do. Anyone speaks out against them, you could be the most stereotypically feminine woman on the planet. They'll automatically clock you as trans because they don't like you.
Riley Gaines, a 25-year-old from where? Thanks for Nashville. Oh, yeah. Please give me your opinions about New York City and when New York City is over. A 25-year-old from Nashville whose only the claim to fame is finishing tied for 5th in a swimming competition.
All of the people who live in suburbs that pepper our Midwest, that feed into places like Chicago and Indianapolis and, et cetera, who have been afraid of going to New York City because of the crime epidemic for the past 30, 40, maybe even 50 years are telling us that now New York City is over because we have a mayor who wants to freeze the rent and, maybe do something about crime that's just not give cops cops tanks, right? So like, but like those people are the people who are like, they have the fingers on the pulse of what's going on in New York City because they live their life in fear of it.
Right. We're going to hear from Riley Gaines, and she's going to tell us all about how Scott Stringer actually won the mayoral race. I just looked. He's the current 5th place
Stringer.
That's a good point, though. I mean, ultimately, like right wingers have such a fantastical image of New York City in their head anyway. Why don't they just like imagine it has a different mayor? Like when when they're imagining that every street corner is littered with syringes and hypodermic needles and crack pipes, and you can't take 2 steps without being accosted by some sort of violent migrant criminal. Like, just imagine that someone else is mayor. Just like imagine some other part of that fantasy. Like, who cares? It's not reality anyway. So,
right. It is amazing how they even like knock Cuomo for being like not a good candidate. No wonder Mamdani beat him. Like Cuomo, I'm pretty sure this is the first time Andrew Cuomo ever lost an election. I mean, even with all his baggage, this was a formidable opponent that had the entire Democratic establishment behind him. Like, and Mamdani beat him handily.
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of people, not just Democrat establishment figures, but also like more Republican establishment figures, are mad at Cuomo for dropping the ball. There is like an unspoken covert contract that exists that it's supposed to be people like Andrew Cuomo's job to prevent people from like Zohran from getting into positions of power. And by nature of how Andrew Cuomo comported himself in office, he made himself invalid in that role. I mean, obviously Eric Adams did as well, but Eric Adams at this point is like a Batman villain roaming around the city. So what are you going to do about that? But Andrew Cuomo is getting like the brunt of this pushback because people like him exist to prevent people like Zohran from coming into positions like he's able to now. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear why Cuomo ran here. Like it was basically like, you do this for us and you're back. You're back. You're looking for you resigned in disgrace. Your political career and aspirations were over. You come, you do this for us. You be the candidate that's going to win and beat all these other guys. And you're back in the fold. Your presidential aspirations down the line are back on. And he clearly was fine with just doing that for those reasons, because his heart was never in New York City and being the mayor of the people of New York.
Oh, yeah. And I think it read the entire time. There was a lack of authenticity. And, I think a lot of people are mad for a lot of different reasons. And the 2 main ones is that this election, this victory for Zohran and for the working class people of New York City is a referendum on establishment politics as usual, not just Democratic Party establishment, but Republican Party establishment politics as usual. And it's an opportunity for leftists to have a case study, a very visible case study for, to provide proof that the policies that we've been advocating for decades in some people's cases actually are effective at driving the kinds of changes that oftentimes are presented as impossible to generate by neoliberals and neoconservatives in our government.
All right. Yeah. It'll be fun to watch what they do. But before you joined us earlier at the start of the show, Brandon, we were talking about Bill Ackman and his ingenious plan to field a write-in candidate instead of getting behind one of the other 4 non-Mamdani candidates and coalescing around one of them to stop the evil socialist scourge. He's fielding a write-in candidate, and his selling point, his sales pitch to that potential candidate is, you don't have to do anything. The election is only 100 some odd days away, and I got tons of money at my disposal. So just help us out.
Bill Ackman really has become like a recurring villain online now. I kind of thought that he would blow over after the whole, getting rid of the president of Harvard, super wife guy. My wife is also a plagiarist, allegedly kind of thing. But every week he has something else going on. And he's really just I would be exhausted if I was Bill Ackman. I'm just going to put that out there.
Look, he's a perfect sort of example of how money lets bullshit defy gravity, because he's permanently, and can anybody name the main contribution he's made to the world? In terms of did he make any good business deals? Did he make any trades? No.
I don't even
Off the top of your head, you can't. Nobody listening to me can. And even if, and I've done this exercise before, I've like looked to see what I would even cite. And it's just, he's a guy who traded, he buy and sells at the right time. Like, like these are not actually producers. These are not people that add anything to society. The most famous thing he's ever done is lose a bet to a pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing scheme, Herbalife. He 12 years ago, he took out a short bet against Herbalife because, as we all know, it's a multi-level marketing scheme. And then a different billionaire decided, I want him, I don't like him, and I think we can kind of see why, because he's not a likable guy. So I'm going to float Herbalife. I think it was Carl Icahn. Just give them a whole bunch of money so Bill Ackman eats crap. And he ate crap. And that's his most famous contribution to the world, is basically saying a multi-level marketing scheme was going to fail. Because actually he knows less about capitalism than we do. Because multi-level marketing schemes are perfectly at home in capitalism. They can last a long time. Amway, for instance. Look at, I've talked to the boys in the Brigham Young Money podcast about how much of Utah is just multi-level marketing schemes. But he's got a lot of money, so it doesn't matter how stupid he is.
Well, I mean, I think this election, one other thing that it was a referendum on was this reality that, money is not everything in every election. There's been so much work done to justify the unfettered access that special interest money has to Democratic Party politicians' pockets and coffers, that it's just become a truism that people believe that like having more money just means that you win, despite multiple times that not being the case. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump in the 2016 election, most famously. But in this case, I think Andrew Cuomo had almost like 5 times more money. A lot of that coming from super PACs at some point than Zohran, or some multiple of what Zohran had. But that money had a cost. It was coming from sources that were quite transparently looking to shape the landscape of New York City, its policy landscape, in a way that didn't benefit the working class people who ultimately were the ones who were going to be casting their vote. And so I look forward to Bill Ackman pumping and losing millions of his own dollars into this election, because it will continue to prove the point that some money is bad money. And the more we can prove that point, the more we can get people away from just accepting that, politicians, Democrat politicians, have to take money from billionaires, because otherwise, how will they win? How will they be competitive?
Yeah, and I would encourage him to, if he does run, continue making it all about Israel, to the exclusion of any other type of attacks on Mamdani, because to not only win the mayoralty with the Democratic Socialist, but also put to bed this heinous smear, which is that anybody that has a problem with how Israel conducts itself and how America supports it in that conduct is an anti-Semite. It's the biggest fucking joke of this century so far, that we can't have an honest discussion about this stuff. And I hope that what this campaign does is turn the page on that once and for all.
All right. I'm dying to see who I don't think he's going to run, but I am dying to see who he's going to get. I think the most realistic scenario is no one comes forward because they see what ridiculousness it is, just for their own career, and he just ends up putting a ton of money into Eric Adams. I mean, that seems to be what the outcome is, the most logical outcome.
Yeah. And I mean, this type of victory really salts the earth for that, because if it was one thing, if he would have sneaked across in the 8th round, he blew him out in the 1st round. Like, people showed up for him. Like, that is, like, when you see that guy, that LimeWire guy that I mentioned earlier, he's not a good guy. He gives money to RFK, and for anti-vax stuff. Like, he's a psycho. He's another one of these Silicon Valley psychos that have all the money that should have gone to keep people in their houses after the financial crisis, but instead we gave it to banks to give it to freaks like that to make surveillance applications for commerce and, the NSA. What Mamdani did was bring them all to heel and make them bend the knee, which is, as Will Menaker was saying, is what ultimately needed to happen for the left in this country to ever have any sort of coherent ideology that people understand as something that will translate to power.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. It's something that's incredibly necessary at a time where people across the political spectrum are becoming disillusioned with the powers that be, with the establishment. It's going to be so important to have a case like New York City, a mayor like Zohran to point to show an alternative to what will be like the common sense narratives that start to trickle into our, more legacy media space surrounding like, well, maybe Trump wasn't hard enough on immigrants. In fact, he wasn't so hard on immigrants. Maybe all of this continued material deprivation that you're seeing around you after Trump, after Gavin Newsom, maybe like just means that we have to be more explicitly fascist. Having a situation like, a socialist or Democratic socialist mayor in New York City enacting like wide sweeping structural changes is going to make it easier to prevent people from being, as many people, I should say, from being like suckered into this idea that like what's wrong with society can be fixed with the same old neoconservative, neoliberal talking points, but maybe ramped up far enough to just be explicitly fascist now.
Right. Yeah, they don't want him there because he's going to be able to do carry out his agenda in a way that I said this earlier too. Like, as big as having some Congress people in federal government on the left, they can't just outright go there and enact parts of their agenda. That's not how that position works. As mayor, he'll be able to just outright do some of the things that he said he wanted to do. There's not going to be a whole litany of people he needs to get behind a bill and vote on it, and then that goes to the Senate, and then he's going to be able to just do things.
Which will also set a bad precedent because it'll make, people wonder why Democrats and other executive branch positions in government, governors, president, et cetera, don't wield power the same way, especially when they see the actual impact that the policies that he's proposing will have on people's lives. They'll want them for themselves. And, they won't care if you call it socialism. They won't care if you call it communism. Maybe there will be some dead enders and, the number of those people will dwindle over time. But I'm sure there will be some dead enders who inevitably will not be won over by the material impact that the policies have. But I think more and more people, especially at a time where cost of living is out of control, where people can't afford transportation, people can't afford food, people can't afford education for their children, they're going to see what he's offering and want those things because they'll want to better their own lives. Like the promise of bettering your own life or bettering your children's life is a very, very, very attractive promise. And it's ultimately what every politician is selling. Unfortunately, the politicians in both Republican and Democratic Party are selling, a false promise there.
Right.
Just be moderate.
I mean, they'll be. What were you saying?
I was saying just be moderate, and that's the way to win elections.
Right.
Yeah, just suck more.
There'll be some things that he won't be able to do without, Kathy Hochul, for example. And I hope he uses the bully pulpit at his fullest to let everyone know because, Cuomo was infamous for hurting New York City because of his feuding with Bill de Blasio. And so, if Kathy Hochul doesn't want to get on board and she wants to play those same Cuomo-like corruption games, then we're coming after her too.
Well, I think honestly, what you said about Cuomo reminded me of another strategic error he made when running for mayor of New York City. Like I personally, if I were like a, legacy dynasty Democratic establishment candidate running for mayor in New York City, I would not have, by nature of my policy agenda during a, incredibly deadly pandemic, lead to an outsized amount of death in the elderly population, because those are probably going to be a lot of your voters. And so in some ways you're suppressing your own voting base, which I think the Democratic Party establishment has that problem generally. And this is just one manifestation of that. But I think he really shot himself in the foot 3-4 years before this election even. Right.
Yeah, it is. It would be interesting to know exactly where
he lost by exactly the amount of people.
I would love to see if there was an electoral map. You know how there's one that shows the demographics breakdown based on race. It'd be interesting to see a breakdown of where the people he sent to those nursing homes resided, and then overlay that map over the electoral results of 2025.
No, I joke. I think it's both and, right? I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with the politics that are the Democratic Party establishment's politics. And then, Andrew Cuomo resigned in disgrace as a alleged sexual criminal. There were people who were supporting him this time, who called for criminal investigations into Andrew Cuomo. And once he resigned as a result of that, he basically admitted that he was taking responsibility for it, did it. It's not a situation where he just denied forever. Probably if he had done that, they would have maybe opened a criminal investigation. So it made sense to resign. But that's just one thing that is always going to paint you in a negative light within, I think, the Democratic Party in a way that maybe it doesn't have such a big outsized impact in the Republican Party's electoral choices. Because like Democrats, they sell themselves as the party of, women's rights. They sell themselves as the party of like feminism in opposition to the Republican Party's, aggressive, toxic masculinity, aggressive misogyny and sexism. And so when they put forth candidates that have histories of alleged sexual misconduct, it just puts a bad taste in people's mouth. It makes them seem like hypocrites. And in some ways it energizes the opposition.
Right. And you're gonna see a ton of people who called on him to step down and then endorsed him, try to sweep that under the rug in the future so they can continue to
it's so disgusting.
You cannot let them. This needs to be held against them forever. In fact, if you stayed out of this race even, and after Andrew Cuomo threw his hat in the ring and you had called for him to resign previously and then you just kept your mouth shut, it is the equivalent of endorsing him, in my opinion.
You know what makes it especially disgusting is that there's been seemingly no work done on Andrew Cuomo's part to rehabilitate himself as a result as it pertains to his, again, alleged sexual misconduct. Obviously, there was not a criminal investigation. There was an investigation that seemed to indicate that he was guilty of what they were alleging, and he resigned, which also gives the impression that is the case. But there wasn't a criminal investigation, so I guess we just have to say alleged in this case. So there were many instances of alleged sexual misconduct that targeted employees under him. And so, if you endorse him to get back into a position of power after he has shown absolutely no remorse for what he's done to women under his control, under his power, and his employ, you're basically just you're ensuring that there are going to be more victims. Essentially, that was what was happening there. There were people who were looking at their doing the political calculus for what was best for their career and going well, if he happens to sexually harass a few more interns, if he happens to engage in a little bit of sexual misconduct with a few more women against their will, well, that's just sometimes you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
Right. Yeah. It was just yes. But it seems like the days of like Brad Lander said yesterday or the day before, the days of Cuomo are gone. He is no longer the present or future. Good fucking riddance. And I hope that's the case.
I think he's done. And I mean, what's fascinating to me about this moment, though, is the power vacuum that Mamdani is able to rise up in. There is everyone's talking about how bad of a candidate Cuomo is. That is a structural problem. That is not an accident of history. The Democrats don't have people that... Obama was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And frankly, if he didn't come, they wouldn't probably even know that they could do that because it is hard. They've been trying to replicate the Obama seller of the status quo for since before he came around and since. But there's no one. Who is that? Who plot Elisa Slotkin? So now when MSNBC talks about opposing the current regime in power, they bring in Zohran Mamdani.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.